Welcome back to the video. Grow Strength the Next here, Johnny the Strength Coach. What I'm going to go over today is a very quick review of a meta-analysis done on should you train to failure or not? Should you leave reps in reserve? What are the modalities behind it? Does it actually work? Are we just ego lifters? What is it? What do you think it is at first? Before we go into this, the meta-analysis we go over very briefly. Of course, there are long peer reviews done on this, meta-analysis done, and Iron Culture podcast have gone over this and covered it for a couple of hours. I'll drop that link in below if you want a deep dive, but we're going to go over the review and the conclusion today so you can get the digestible bite-sized variation. Of course, I'm hoping this video won't go over 10 minutes, so I'll shut my blabbermouth and go into it right now. But before I go, what do you think is the best way to train? Do you think training to failure is the best thing? And at the end of the video, comment again, let me know if you think it is or it isn't. Have you changed your mind? Do you think that you will train to failure all the time? Or are there caveats? Are there reasons why you should or shouldn't train to failure? When we look at the meta-analysis, okay, before I go into anything, there is no clear-cut answer when it comes to muscle growth. Muscle growth is still very much in the growing stages, see what I did there, of science. So the reasons why, many reasons why studies and meta-analysis won't work for the individual. And I'll give you a kind of a general overview of a study. So for instance, a study being leg growth, for instance. So let's say what's better, a squat or a leg press? We've done that in previous videos. What's better, a leg press or a squat? It's not just for strength purposes, but purely for muscle growth. So let's say that particular study did a cross-sectional area of the quad, just the quad, to see which one at the leg press and the squat produces more muscle growth. Which one's better for volume, which one's better for load, low rep, high rep, which one's better? So let's say they do the same load of 12 reps and the leg press comes out better for quadricep growth. Just on that cross-sectional area, that one particular area of the quad. So they've done an EMG on that particular area and it's come out saying that the quads are better for building muscle. Is that the correct answer? Well, it doesn't look at modalities of glute, hip, it doesn't look at modalities of core, hamstrings, even though hamstrings aren't engaged that much in either. So you've got to look at where are you growing muscle overall. Are you growing the bulk of your whole body, or are you just growing it for one area? So you look at isolation and purposes of variation. So variational exercises matter. There are better ways of testing a model. Let's say, for instance, instead of using EMG on the cross-sectional area of the quad, you can do the whole body with, let's say, for instance, a DEXA scan. But the downside to a DEXA scan is it can be up to 4% wrong. And let's say the increases in muscle size from a leg press to a squat are 2% difference. It's negligible because it's only 2% out of 4%, so you don't actually know if it's better or worse. So in reality, doing a variety of exercises will be overall best for muscle growth. Now, volume and load do matter as well. Training experience matters, stresses matter, genetics matter, but we'll break it down into each section. So first, we're going to look into training experience. Okay, so a beginner and someone who's maybe been training 10 years may have to train slightly differently. And it's not just based on their genetics, but it's based on their experiences of technical and mechanical failure. So there are two types of failure. Mechanical failure is when you absolutely fail each rep. You can no longer maintain form and everything just breaks down. Technical failure technically is leaving reps in reserve because you are able to go to absolute failure, which is mechanical failure, but you leave maybe a rep or two in reserve because you know the technique will break down. So there is such a thing as technical failure and mechanical failure. And when it comes to novices or beginners, the likelihood is they're more likely to go to mechanical failure more often. But the good thing is you get this thing called newbie gains. You probably build most of your muscle in the first 2 years, and then after that point, it's diminishing returns. But how do you get more muscle growth and optimize it over time as you get more experienced? Well, you've got to change the modalities up, you've got to change the rep ranges up. We've gone over this in past videos, which I can always link down, and just look through my old videos. But what is best? Reps, load. Well, a lot of people say volume, and then some people will say load. Some people will say volume and load. But it doesn't matter about necessarily training experience here. Now we're looking at genetics. How much do you accumulate fatigue? Are you someone who can train 3 times a week, even if you're a beginner, or someone who accumulates fatigue fairly easily on volume or load? Or are you someone who can train 6 times a week, train 24/7, and can somehow hit failure on every single set and grow? Now, for some people, that would absolutely kill them. It'd be diminishing returns. You would get weaker, smaller, and you would be so fatigued you'd probably just end up not going. So you've got to look at what's best for you. Now you're seeing it from a genetics point of view. Your bone structure matter, which exercises you're best at matter. Of course, you're also looking at your muscle fibers, which type of muscle fibers switch on more, which type of muscle fibers are best for you. So some people have more fast switch muscle fibers, some people have more growth muscle fibers that you generally use for weights or weight training, and some people have more cardiac muscle fibers. So depending on that person, one person could grow muscle a lot more easily than the other person, even if the rep ranges are the same. Now, so you look at it from this point of view, what hurts you the most? If you are doing constant sets of 15 and that doesn't suit your body, it feels not very nice, you do sets of 8 instead. So okay, sets of 8, people will say between 6 and 12 reps is a good range, but for some people that doesn't work. Some people grow more muscle between 1 and 5 reps. And yes, literally anywhere between 1 to 20 plus reps will grow your muscle. There have been loads of studies done on that now to show that it isn't just about reps, and volume. You can accumulate lots of volume, but you can actually have diminishing returns on muscle gains because your body is not acclimatized to it, or there could be many other factors. So we need to go into the other factors right now as to what might be causing issues of you growing muscle, or what might be causing you issues of growing muscle to failure. So, like I said, some people can go to failure all the time, but it also matters of stresses of life, stresses. So look at it this way, work patterns can be an issue. So you might not work out at the optimal time. Okay, so now look at it from this factor, you're a nurse or a doctor or whatever it is, you might work on shift patterns, so you can't always train at optimal times. That could also affect your sleep patterns, that can affect your diet, so you might crave more caffeine, sugar, because your sleep or whatever is disrupted. So now you've got other issues going on, such as lifestyle, such as kids, or a stressful job that has deadlines. All of a sudden you've got new stresses in your life which can't optimize training. So you have to find a way to optimize it that works for you. You have to find a set time per week around your shifts that's going to work for you, that you can get enough adequate sleep of around 8 hours, that you can get enough protein in your diet, that you can get enough macronutrients and micronutrients in your diet, so you're able to get the best out of your muscle growth. Now, if you've got a lot of stresses going on, are you going to be able to train to failure all the time? What do you think? It's a no, isn't it? You cannot train to failure all the time because you're already pre-fatigued. And let's say you're trying to push for other things too. Now, this falls down to personal preferences. If it's just muscle growth you're going for, that's great. You can just focus on that. However, some people play sports. Some people also want to get strong too, so they want to focus on strength. So they have to change their programming around based around their other lifestyle models. So now you're looking at it from that perspective as well. You have to see, okay, would training to failure work if I've got football the next day? Probably not. Would training work if I had a heavy meeting the next day, or I had to take my kid to basketball practice, or whatever it is? There's always reasons why training to failure could be an issue based around your lifestyle. And my recommendation is try to optimize training around your lifestyle. Write a plan in, of course. Write your diet plan in, and then of course not just writing in, but pre-doing your food. So you're optimizing your food, you're optimizing your sleep, you're optimizing your training with other training, let's say if you're doing another sport, or around your lifestyle. So if you're looking to train to failure every time and it works for you, that's fantastic. You can train to failure all the time. You may have built a bias over time to say, look, egotistically, I train 6 times a week, therefore everyone should train like me. It's worked for me, so you're just being a bitch if you don't do it that way. And of course, it's not just ego, but it's based around your model. Of course, some people are genetically more inclined to grow muscle with higher volume, higher loads, and also higher degrees to failure. However, if someone's telling you to do that and failure doesn't work for you, you feel more fatigued, you feel bloated, you feel tired, you feel irritable, and of course your muscles aren't growing, that's clearly a sign that that training methodology does not work for you. So when it comes down to it, training to failure is a yes and it's a no. The studies are still unclear whether training to failure is a good thing. I would say personally and anecdotally, from my personal experience from my training, although I'm not a bodybuilder as such, I do strength in other sports as well, based on my clients who try and train for muscle growth or just they're training for many other things. Training near to failure is good. High loads is good, low loads is good. Programming for different ranges of reps, different ranges of volume, different ranges of load. So your body is peaking out at certain times and then deloading at other times to help you recover, recuperate, recenter your body so you can then get rid of that cumulative and chronic fatigue. So your central nervous system's good, your muscle fibers are good, your tendons are good, and you're keeping healthy. Now, factors, and the final factor that I'll go into is injuries, and people who are clearly getting injured from training to failure all the time, or people who have had previous injuries and they can't do some things as well technically as other people, so you have to do workarounds. Now, idealistically, I would say what's your athlete X said, 16 sets of this for your chest works great, I mean, there's no such rule as 16 sets, 20 sets. It could be 12 sets. You could train 2 times a week. You could train 6 times a week. Honestly, it all depends on all the factors I've spoke about today. So essentially, what I'm saying is you have to base it around your lifestyle. You have to base it around what issues you're having around your lifestyle to optimize muscle growth. Now, if it was all in a vacuum, we all had loads of time in the world, we slept optimally, we ate the same diet, we had the same muscle fibers, everyone was perfectly the same height, same bone structure, whatever it is. I would say, training near to failure every time is probably a good thing because you can accumulate it, but you can recover well and you can do it again. Training to failure sometimes is a good thing, but taking a step back and going, this training to failure is actually really fatiguing me. I need to pull it back, even go 3 to 4 reps from failure. So RIR, reps in reserve. You can go up to 4 reps in reserve and still grow muscle just as good as someone who isn't growing muscle, who is growing muscle to failure. I hope that made sense. That's kind of the whole shebang of the cumulative studies and my anecdotal experiences. Maybe leave 1 or perhaps 2 left in reserve. That way you can train consistently, you can train consecutively, and you can train throughout the year, and hopefully that will keep you injury free, it will keep you stress free, and any lifestyle things that come up that are issues or over a period of time can become issues won't affect your training as much. I hope you like this video. I also would like to pop a comment. Have you changed your mind? Do you think still training to failure is a good thing, or do you think it all depends based on the individual? Of course, I could be completely wrong, but based on the meta-analysis evidence and based on my own anecdotal experience as a strength and conditioning coach and a body composition coach, it is something that I have looked at for quite some time. And yet again, the more I look deeper into the rabbit hole of these studies, the more I realise that it's not as clear-cut and straightforward as one would like to say. I'd love to be able to give you an answer and say, look, this amount of sets, this amount of reps, do it, that's it. Train this amount of times per week, eat this food. We all know that it's not the same. Even our diets, can't be the same because of the type of proteins we eat, the type of things we do. Anyway, I won't ramble on anymore, otherwise the video will become from bite-sized to a long-winded video and a discussion. If there is any comments you want to put below that you've had experiences of, or you think I'm completely wrong, that's absolutely fine. Comment below. We can have a little chat about it. Maybe you could fill me in on something I'm not aware of, because like I say, the more down the rabbit hole you go, the less you actually know in some circumstances. So the science is not necessarily flawed, but it is definitely not 100% there yet, and I don't think it ever will be. The benchmark keeps moving forward. The more we know, the better we can be. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Watch out for the next video. It's going to be reps in reserve or should you train to failure for strength. I'll see you in the next one.